Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings or roots, what led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. My name is Amy Bartlett, and it is my hope that these stories, generously shared by my guests, offer perspective and insight into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing. So whoever, whenever, and wherever you are, welcome. I'm glad you're here. In today's episode, I chat with Laura Ritzie, a counselor with over 20 years of experience supporting clients in both the public and private sectors. She's also a PhD student with a passion for researching psilocybin and ceremony and contributing to conversations about loss, grief, and our relationship with death. In her most recent work, Laura has begun to apply a continuing bonds lens to understand and explore the ancestral connections that many experience in psilocybin ceremonies. And she's curious about people's experiences of connection in relation to resilience, meaning-making, and flourishing. Now, speaking of flourishing, beyond her research, Laura loves to travel and try new food, and she thrives on connection with others, spending time with her husband and children, walking with her dogs, and campfires at the lake with her family and friends. This connection to connection is a highlight of my conversation with Laura. In our chat together, she shares about her nature-filled childhood, her later brushes with illness and her own mortality, her explorations with cannabis for healing, and how those experiences and the curiosity they opened up in her led to her first psychedelic experience in her 40s. Laura is someone I know and admire for her patience, gentleness, and thoughtful approach to engaging with others and with herself, as you will hear in our conversation. I have always experienced her as someone full of both a sparkling vitality and a deeply grounded respect for others and the natural world. And I'm grateful that her iterative, open, and reverential spirit is on full display in our chat together. And so, let's hear more about Laura's psychedelic roots. So lovely to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you, Amy. It's so good to be here.
I wonder, before we move into your childhood and how you came to psychedelics and your first experience, who is Laura today? How would you like to introduce yourself, or what's something that you'd like folks to know about you before we move into our conversation together?
Well, I am a PhD student right now working on looking at psilocybin and grief. So that's important work to me. And I think probably I'll touch on that a little bit later too, why that's important to me. I'm a mom. This is my kind of second career in academia. I've been a counselor for about 20 years. It's lots of lessons, lots of love. So in a nutshell, that's who I am.
That's a beautiful little nutshell. Yeah, thank you. So much of psychedelic experiencing is part of the human experience. And so we like to look at our human roots. And I'm curious about where you come from and your childhood experiences. So thinking back to your younger self before you encountered psychedelics, how would you describe your way of seeing the world and what felt true to you as a child?
I love that question so much. As a child, I was always drawn to nature and magic and making friends with the birds or the creatures, the animals. And I was also a pretty sensitive child. I would have dreams of my grandparents and connections like that. I had a very loving home with my mom, dad. I'm the oldest of four, so my siblings. But growing up and getting older, I definitely noticed there was some discomfort with, having that relationship with the spiritual side of things. It made my folks, I would say my mom, nervous. I think that connection, and I think that's for lots of reasons. I think intergenerationally, it wasn't safe to necessarily have connections that could be seen as weird or outside of the dominant culture, but definitely always felt supportive and safe to talk in the home, just not so much outside of the home.
Right.
Yeah, if I was having dreams or if I, thought bird messenger came to me or, those sorts of things. Yeah.
And that's something you experienced. You'd have birds bring messages or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was very magical and lovely, and yeah, my parents encouraged that and that connection with nature, but outside of the home, maybe it wasn't safe to talk about.
Did your family have a particular religious affiliation or practice, or was this in a general accepting container of spirituality without a religious overlay?
There was a religious overlay in the sense that we, attended Anglican church,
Mhm.
but again, my mom, sh like, credit to her, I think she saw the church more as community than as a dogmatic way to live your life maybe, and would, let us know that the spirituality is what's important. This church offers
Mm.
us community, but it was written by people for their own reasons, the Bible, for example, so you have to take it all with a grain of salt. There's good lessons there, but it's not the end all be all. So she gave me that insight too, that spirituality was an important piece, but that it needed to be protected. Yeah.
Mhm. And that you could maybe decide what was important to you or what your experience
Yes.
was, which would be a
Yes.
really important lesson.
Definitely, like, to have that critical lens to think, "Okay, where's the power in this situation? Why might they be telling us these stories? Do you think that's true?"
Hmm.
She was ahead of her time like that, I think.
Especially growing up as a child who was having those experiences of connection with nature and animals and
Yes.
having those curiosities. It's wonderful that you had those experiences in a container that was accepting and loving in that way.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, it was, it really was, but it also planted the sense that, "Oh, maybe there's things that we're not supposed to talk about out in the open or in mixed company. Oh, maybe there's something to be worried about or that's not safe outside
Hmm.
of this container that we have here."
That's interesting. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, and on that note, as it pertains to psychedelics, were they ever discussed or were drugs ever discussed in your family? Were they thought about, talked about either positively or negatively?
Yeah, definitely, drugs were discussed, but as a preventative sort of thing, like I was a child of the '80s, so
Right.
this is your brain on drugs, those commercials. The propaganda of the '70s definitely influenced my folks, and
Mhm.
so they were really, scared, nervous, did not have a relationship with psychedelics or drugs
Mm.
that I was aware of or that they talked about, and they certainly they certainly weren't, encouraging me or my siblings to experiment. I mean, eventually they did, but that came much later in my
Right.
life. Yeah.
And so with that lack of engagement or that cautious approach to drug use, where did your interest or awareness of psychedelics or non-ordinary states of consciousness come from, would you say?
Yeah.
Mm.
So I know exactly where it came from. When I was in my mid to late 30s, I got really ill. And it was a mysterious illness. There was a lot of pain involved in this illness, and they couldn't quite figure it out. And so I had a doctor suggest trying cannabis.
Mm.
Like, okay. So at this stage, I was 38.
Okay.
And I had never really experienced drugs, maybe
Mhm.
tried cannabis once in university. So I had I didn't know where to start. So I remember at 38 calling my younger brother to be because I knew he had a bit more experience than I did. Like, "So what do I do? What's it supposed to be like?" So it was pretty funny. And then as I started to heal from this illness and I saw the powerful medicine that cannabis was and what it gave back to my world and my life,
Mhm.
And simultaneously, I had gone through our dominant mainstream health system and had been let down in a lot of ways. And so turning to alternative or non dominant ways of healing really became an interest of mine, and it helped me save my life, honestly. So I thought, if cannabis can do this for me, if folks outside of our dominant way of knowing things can offer me this kind of healing and support, what else is there? And so that's how I started to research and learn about, for example, psilocybin, that I'm developing a very beautiful relationship with as I move along in my own journey. So it was an interesting, introduction, and so as I said, my family, my folks especially, they were living witnesses to my decline in health, and then my ability to kinda come back to life in a full way because of cannabis and because of this alternative, route to healing that I was taking, and then, of course, super supportive about me learning with regards to psilocybin, because
Mhm.
they've witnessed, yeah, the kinda magic. Maybe that's an over well, I don't think it's an overstretch. It's kinda magic, the magic that can happen with
Mhm.
plant medicine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you consider cannabis a psychedelic?
Mm. I go back and forth on
Mm.
that. Um, sometimes, if I can say that, sometimes
Yeah.
I've had incredible experiences with cannabis that have been humbling and
Mhm.
connecting and gorgeous. And sometimes I have experiences with cannabis where, my gosh, it just helps the pain, the physical feeling of pain. It's not necessarily a spiritual experience, although one could probably argue that that is changing your perception of your pain. If I had to pick one answer, I'd say yes. I think it
Mhm.
is. Mhm.
For what it's worth, I consider it a psychedelic.
Yeah.
Yeah. A plant teacher at a minimum.
Yes. Oh,
Mm.
absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
So, as you began to contemplate processing your experience of working with cannabis to heal and transitioning into a curiosity around the larger field of psychedelics and options there, did you know others who had explored the more traditional psychedelics, or were you venturing into unknown territory? You mentioned talking to your brother about cannabis.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar sort of
Yeah.
resource?
Honestly, I didn't. Again, at this point, I'm probably approaching 40, right?
Mhm.
My circles were pretty mainstream, even in, like, the counseling world that I came from, there wasn't a lot of conversation about it. So it was kind of poking out into the world, doing my research, my own research, my own reading, my own
Mhm.
and starting to make connections. The one link that really helped me is for part of my career, I worked in hospice with folks at end of life and palliative care and folks who were grieving. And gosh, that space taught me so many lessons. And then having my own illness and my own brush with death, the things that I learned in hospice, I really came to know personally in a very embodied kind of way. And so kind of that space, that liminal space that like you can witness folks have at end of life or in my own experience coming close to death, I knew there was something there. And I was reading then these reports of, like, for example, folks that had experiences with psilocybin going to these places and spaces and developing relationship with it. So I knew that there was something there that I needed to learn more about. I knew that there was a richness there, resources there for folks to build relationship or connections with something that was profoundly important to me, and I think probably pretty important to other folks too for their own reasons.
Yeah, that's such a visceral and acute understanding of and curiosity about altered states of consciousness, or what else is out
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
That line between life and death, and you
Mhm.
having both a personal experience of towing that line
Mhm.
and in your work supporting others in that space. That's
Mhm.
really grounded
Mhm.
ironically, way to be curious about these spaces and places.
Yes, I agree. It totally makes sense. And because it was so visceral and so grounded, like I
Mm,
never once denied the reality of it. It was impossible to deny the
mm,
reality of these
mhm,
spaces. So that gave me, I don't know if courage is the right word, or just like a sense of like, oh, I need to, the willingness to venture into the unknown and to risk maybe sounding strange to my friends or my families or my circles, right? Because nobody really that I knew had experience with psychedelics.
mhm. Yeah, and so they talk. I don't know if this relates to you or if this feels genuine for you, but in artistic or spiritual spaces, people sometimes talk about having a calling to
Mm.
a particular medium or a particular experience. I'm curious, do you feel that psychedelics called you in some way from your own personal experiences and your professional accompaniment?
Yeah, if I had to use that word, I think I would. It's been a series of miracles, really, along my path that have led me to this point to have this relationship with myself, my spirituality, psychedelics.
Mhm,
And so, in that way, I do feel called to it. I do feel like I'm on a path that's unfolding in front of me, and that I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I may not know what it looks like fully. I don't know what's around the corner, but I do have faith in making decisions from love and from knowing
mm,
what's the next best thing for me in this
mm.
seeking, this curiosity, this path.
That's beautiful. That's so beautifully put, Laura.
Mm.
And so what was that knowing telling you about moving into that first experience that you had with psychedelic? Can you paint a picture of that first experience, how you sort
Yeah.
of moved into that space and what that looked like for you?
Yes. So psilocybin had been calling to me for a little while. I have a beautiful relationship with cannabis, and
Mhm,
I thought, I think I'm ready to develop this relationship with mushrooms, with psilocybin, the same kind of way I've developed my relationship with cannabis. So I am an academic. I did all my reading, I did all my research, I took some courses, to get ready and stuff. But then really what it came down to is finding someone I trusted to talk to about preparation,
good.
getting myself starting to think about setting intention, starting to think about developing my relationship with the mushroom before I even approached the ceremony, like starting to talk to or be with, starting even a little bit of microdosing to just like develop
Mhm,
that relationship. That's probably the best way to say it. So I knew I needed to feel safe. So I picked a
mhm,
very safe place that I love by the lake. We've got a cottage there. My husband agreed to sit for me. So he is a rock for me in my journey, and I trust him. And so I knew, all right, I've got the prep, I've got the space, I've got the
mhm,
the sitter, the support. And so then I knew that day I was going to wake up, I was going to have my ritual, my prayers or my welcoming. I was going to make my tea as part
mhm,
of the ritual to drink the mushroom. And so I did. And it
mm,
was a beautiful experience. So
mm,
I started the experience out in nature because I needed to feel grounded. I knew that about myself.
mhm,
So I started it in nature, at the water, looking at the sky and the clouds move. And then soon enough, things started to reveal themselves to me in the clouds. And it was beautiful. And then my husband said something about needing to bring, the electricity down to this part of the lake so that we could plug something in. And I thought that was hilarious. And I had to remind him, like, maybe it's starting, honey. It's starting. It's time to. So there was a little bit of levity at that point, but then we moved on really quick. And there came a point where I knew, okay, I was ready. I needed to go lie down. I needed to go lie down and close my eyes and start to receive some deeper messages, deeper meanings, deeper images. It was such a beautiful experience because I felt like I was safe, like I was in control, and like I knew what I needed to do to receive this. And so, as the images started to present themselves, I had my grandmother there who had died a few years before, and my beloved dog there at my side in spirit. She had also died a few years before, and they carried me and journeyed me through some pretty profound understandings of my place in my relationships and my family. And so the come up was beautiful. The word that I have for it is gorgeous. It was a
Mm.
word that my grandmother used to say after my dad would make these incredible Sunday meals. And when she was living, she would come over every Sunday and have this gorgeous meal. And that's what she would call it, gorgeous. This is just gorgeous, this whole experience. And so that was the word that I came out with, just this like gorgeousness of this experience now in this life. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that that word is hers and that it
Yeah.
relates to nourishment. Like that experience sounds so nourishing and resourcing, giving you what you needed, perhaps,
Yes.
in terms of reconnecting or connecting with yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I came out of it just all I could say is it's gorgeous.
Wow.
Mm.
How was the come down for you coming back to earth, coming back into this plane of existence after that process?
Gosh, that I find really difficult. It was difficult.
Mhm.
The best way, and I've probably shared this before, but the best analogy that I have to it in my life experience is it's like having a baby. You know that you're going into this process, that something is going to happen big that, has the potential to change your life in ways that you don't know or you can't possibly understand at this point. And you go through this experience, and parts of it are hard and parts of it are wondrous. And then you get to the other side, you've had the baby. But now now it's the come down. Now it's the reality of, "Oh gosh, okay, what am I gonna do with this now? Now that I have it here, in my metaphysical arms or hands or mind or heart, what am I going to do with this now? How am I gonna support this
Mhm.
newness, new understanding? How am I gonna love this? How am I going to grow this into
Yeah.
something meaningful and powerful?" And so it's hard because, the world keeps going on. Like you can have a baby, but the world keeps moving at its regular pace. You can have this profound experience, but the world keeps moving at its regular pace. And so that was difficult. I had had enough forethought to know that I needed like that evening and night. So, my folks watched the kids. I could just have the space at the lake to myself to kind of sit in it,
Mhm.
just to sit in it and marinate kind of in that, like, wondrousness of what just happened.
What did happen? What did you birth?
Mm. I birthed a new understanding of the roles that I play in my life, and also the importance of the roles that my loved ones play in their life.
Mm.
So I came away with a new understanding of the this might sound strange, so I don't know, but I'll tell you how it was for me. I came to understand the folks in my lives kind of like as a pack of dogs. Like I had Penny the dog as my
Yeah.
spirit guide there with me. And when things were getting too hard, she'd swoop down and I could cuddle up in her fur and she'd keep me safe and move me along. Well, I started to understand my family kind of as like this connection of creatures that love each other and support each other. And maybe it's not always in the way that you want or need or understand, but they're doing their best to keep the pack safe. They're doing their best to keep like steady on. And so that for me was like oh, because I would get angry or resentful at people in my life or my family for like not showing up how I wanted them to show up, or, as we all do. But kind of having this shift in thinking about, oh, there was made space then for like healing and forgiveness and just loving my family for who they are and not needing them necessarily to be different or to do anything different. They're important, and I wouldn't be here without them. They've supported me. They've moved me along through thick and thin, storms and otherwise. Came away with like a lot of gratitude for that.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of how you described your childhood in the sense that relationship with animals and being part of this collection menagerie of nature and the fauna,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then seeing the power of seeing your family in that way and your place in that.
Yes.
Beautiful echo.
Yes. It really, thank you for making that connection. I hadn't thought of it in that way, but yeah, definitely. There's definitely something to that. And I came out of that experiencing trying to explain as much as I could to my family because everybody's super supportive and we're so curious about what it was like for me. So there was an element of humor too to like explain that, oh, I saw you all as dogs, But humor in my family is a cherished thing. So it was nice to have that kind of
Mm.
exchange and that way to understand, because they could all understand that too. They're dog people. They understand what a dog is to you, and
Are
that
they,
unconditional peace.
yeah, are they relational as well in the way that you are? Because, yeah, there's a lot of connection with others. It seems, from what I'm hearing from how you're describing your experience, some people know themselves by looking at themselves, and some people, or everyone has that experience, but we can know ourselves in different ways by looking at
Yes.
ourselves, but
Yes.
also by looking at our relationships.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you are a very relational person, and I love that that first experience was a relational knowing and encounter.
Yes. Yeah. I think they are certainly relational people. I just hadn't really thought about it
Hmm.
before. They are very much about the pack,
Mhm.
about the success and the success in life, success in health, success in love and connection. They are very much dedicated folk like that. So,
Mm.
yeah, they are relational.
Mm. I'm just curious about it because I know that you are.
For
Mm.
sure.
Mm.
For sure. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. When you say relational, like my first thought goes to like that relationship with like that spiritual realm or that liminal
Mhm.
space. And so there was a bit of hesitancy there to think of them in that way because I think they have those relational pieces for themselves, but definitely here, like in this realm, in this life, in this family, they are very committed and connected to the family, to that here visceral
Mm.
doing the work of this lifetime piece.
Right.
Hmm.
So, Laura, this has been such a great chat. As we start to close, I'm curious, is there anything that you wish you had known before you went into your first experience, or any advice you would give to someone who's contemplating in that path?
Yeah, I would say preparation is so important. I know they say that all the time, but for real, for honest, it is to start developing that connection, that set of intentions, is so important. I've heard folks say, and I think it's true, like once you decide that you're going to have an encounter with psychedelics, like that the journey has begun. So use that space to develop even skills and strategies for yourself, like breath work, like meditation, like because that's going to help you too. Once you have this experience, you're going to come out and then, be needing to integrate all of these potentially profound things that have happened. And I think that integration piece is also connected to the preparation because you can lean into that breath work, that meditate, whatever it is you were doing helps carry. And I would also say, gosh, the integration lasts a really long time. It lasts much longer than, a week or a
Mhm.
day it's the sort of experience like birth, like death that, it pops up again and you revisit it and you come to new understandings, new learnings. So, I would say that would be important. And to surround
Mhm.
yourself with places and spaces and folks that make you feel safe. That goes a long way.
Well, I'm so pleased to hear about how well you set yourself up for your first
Mm.
experience and how much thoughtfulness and preparation you did to have that encounter and to feel safe and supported and nourished and how gorgeous it was.
Amen to that. Yes, gorgeous. It was gorgeous.
Thank you so much for sharing, Laura. It was such a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to hear with you and talk with you and hear about your story.
Thank you, Amy. My pleasure.
Thank you.